Hello everyone, this is Tony Beardslee, and this is my summary presentation of the paper that was done for EDAD 922, Higher Education Finance. And in this paper I'm discussing the future of community college funding. So there seems to be a bit of a paradox in community college funding. On one hand, community colleges seem to be more popular than ever. In some states, there are long waiting lists for students to get into their classes. And what I've also noticed is that the stigma that used to follow community colleges has kind of faded away. It's no longer a second choice. A lot of people are turning to community colleges as their first choice for pursuing their careers. On the other hand, state funding for community colleges has dwindled over the last decade. And therein lies the paradox. That doesn't seem to make much sense. If community colleges are more popular than ever, why is the state funding for them going down? So that's the thing that we look at here in this paper. In the paper, I discussed the history of community college funding, some of the progression of the funding formulas that have occurred over the last century for community colleges. We look at some of the trends in higher education funding that have occurred over the last decade or so. And we look at some recent developments in community college funding and look at some of the future directions and some of the things that may be kind of a glimmer of hope for community colleges. So, first of all, let's look at the origins of community college funding. It's generally agreed that the first community college, or called junior colleges back then, was Joliet Junior College in Illinois. But it wasn't until 1907 in California where the first funding law was passed that allowed a state to fund a community college. Actually, it was done through the K-12 system, but it was still state funding of the community colleges. And since then, the formulas have evolved, whereas in 1918, the average state funding was right around nothing, and in 2000, the average state funding was 45%. And of course, that's going to vary from state to state, but that was the average state funding. Now, some of the trends that have occurred that have had an impact on community colleges, first of all, is performance-based funding. Now, the idea of performance-based funding makes perfect sense on its face, that if funding is going to be provided for colleges, any government official would be interested to know that the funds are being used properly. So it makes sense then that they would tie the funds to those performance benchmarks. However, what they have found is that it's extremely complicated to measure performance of colleges, any college, because there's no real consensus as to what constitutes a success in college. So it's very complicated to measure, and what some people have found in the states that have implemented performance-based funding is that there are a lot of unintended consequences that have made things very complicated and very difficult for community colleges to deal with, and in some cases has made their financial situation very challenging. But the other thing that has happened since the recession in 2008 is a reduction of state funding dollars. And because of that, that has caused a lot of colleges to really increase their tuition by a great percentage, making it much more difficult for people to afford community colleges. So we look at some things that are happening in the more recent past. First of all, we have noticed that there have been some tuition freezes. Some of the states have noticed how tuition has had to increase, and they have said, okay, enough. Maybe that means that they're going to find some other ways to fund the community colleges. We can only hope anyway. Another thing that is encouraging for the future of the finance of community colleges is this idea of President Obama to have free community college. If this proposal goes through, 3/4 of the tuition costs will be covered by the federal government. The other quarter would be handled by the states. Now, whether or not that goes through, or how the government is going to fund this is another discussion for another day. However, for sure, if this does go through, that will permanently change the face of community college finance. And another thing that we're seeing is some new revenue sources from things like workforce development, customized training, and other workforce development programs that are serving as new sources of revenue for colleges. And it really kind of points to a new trend in education that some people are looking at programs like this, non-degree programs, to start their careers. So that's a new revenue source that is popping up in a lot of community colleges, and is encouraging to the future. Now, my advice, and take it for what it is, I'm not sure what lawmakers are listening, but I really believe that state governments should take a really close look at the role that community colleges play in higher education and in the role of our economy. If they're so popular and people are turning to them to start their career, it makes sense that the funding should be increased for community colleges. And as I realized that it hurts a little in the beginning to make such a big investment, I strongly believe that in the long run, this will have a very positive impact on our nation's economy and the economy of our states. So, this is the end of my presentation. This is only a summary of the paper. But I also am at the very end of my master's degree. I started this 2 years ago, and I'm at the very end, and I want to say thank you to my professors, and I really enjoyed my classes, and I especially enjoyed interacting with all of you. And I'd like to say to anyone who is just starting this or is maybe struggling with this a little bit, is to hang in there. You can do it, and it is worth it. So, I'll say goodbye and wish everyone a good day.